right, so it looks like we've started the webinar, and I want to welcome everybody that's listening and watching today. It is my pleasure to introduce some folks here that are going to participate and provide the content for this webinar. We got some really heavy hitters on this one, and we have worked with IronEdge has worked with Galactic Advisors in multiple capacities, but we've done one of these webinars before, and we've had Dave Groot, we've had Jackson Stevens on before. They are fantastic. So I'm really excited for everybody to hear their feedback and their input on what we're going to talk about today. But let me set the stage a little bit, and then we'll go through introductions and we'll kind of get into this thing. So the objectives for this webinar is we really want the listeners to understand what Shadow IT is, and what it means, what risks does this concept and this thing that's out in the world, what is it? What are the risks to that? What is SaaS sprawl? I want you to understand, like, if you can walk out of this thing and go, okay, I understand there's an issue, and I understand what sort of is what platforms and websites and things like that create this issue, then you can come out and you can sort of get smarter on it and have a plan. We want you to understand how attackers can exploit hidden applications, or what risks are. We want to talk about governance and monitoring best practice of Shadow IT, and then we'll get into other concepts as well. And then we want to finish off. We also want to talk about actions that you can take as a SMB, as a small and mid-sized business, to reduce your risk and to create a more secure and productive IT environment. So that's what we want to do today. That's what we'll take out of this thing. But now let me introduce the team. So we've got from Galactic Advisors, Dave and Jackson. I'll turn it over to Dave to introduce himself, and then Jackson.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. My name's Dave Groot. I'm with Galactic Advisors. I'm one of the liability advisors. Been with them for about 13 months, but I was also a partner of theirs for 4 or 5 years prior, and have about 20 years in cybersecurity and incident response experience. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
And hey guys, my name's Jackson Stevens. I'm an attorney. I began my career as a Navy JAG officer. Then I was a federal prosecutor for many years. I was on the DOJ's intellectual property and hacking team, and joined Galactic Advisors to help folks like y'all protect yourselves.
We got 2 strong heavy hitters to this point. Now I want to turn it over to the IronEdge team. So we've got Mr. Rob Foit, the Grand Poobah of security at IronEdge. I'll let him introduce himself.
All right, thanks, Dan. Like Dan said, my name is Rob Foit, Director of Security at IronEdge. I've been in the MSP space for 13, 14 years. Been doing the security side of the house for at least 10, if not longer. So glad to provide some expertise and thoughts around the topics we're going to cover today.
Thanks, Rob. I'm always excited to work with Rob on these because he brings up kind of tidbits that I hadn't even thought about, and I work with him every day. So my name's Dan Mallard. I'll be the moderator today. I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years. I've been with IronEdge in a couple different roles here, leading client success and or leading pro services for about 12 years now. Been in the industry a long time. I was a client of an MSP, so I've been in that SMB IT leader position as well. But we are really excited to talk to you guys about this today because it's such a timely topic. We were talking about it before this thing kicked off. All we talk about is AI with our clients, with our, at home, with our loved ones, and, with our family and out in the community. We talk about AI all the time. And what does that mean for IT infrastructures? What does it mean for decision makers? Let's get into it right now. So I want to start with defining the problem. Right? So let's define this thing, and then we'll figure out how to address it and how to talk about it. So Dave, let me ask you this. Can you share, excuse me, let me back up. What is Shadow IT? Let's start there. How can we describe it to somebody else?
So Shadow IT, like it sounds, is anything that relates to IT. So hardware, software, cloud services, all the infrastructure or anything like that is lurking about in the shadows of your organization, right? So it's something that the IT department is not aware of. It's not been approved or sanctioned maybe by the organization. It's, it's like somebody using their personal Google Drive to share or to store data to go home and work on it. That would be an example of Shadow IT, where it might be outside of the sanction of the organization.
And related to sort of AI and this AI boom, am I
Yes.
right in guessing that shadow IT related to AI in particular are, at least in one way, the many websites and systems you can use to ask AI to solve a problem or give it information? So is that, in this concept, is that how AI falls into it? One of the ways?
Certainly. I mean, we're in a new age, right? AI brings a new age, but even before that, we are seeing the enterprise perimeter kind of dissolve, right? Everything is now cloud based. It's all accessible on mobile devices. It's accessible on your laptop. You can hit your desktop, and every which way we're able to do it without installing, without necessarily approving, without necessarily purchasing. In many cases, there's free trial versions of these products, right? And so that's moving about the organization quite frequently. And that's where shadow AI is coming into play. You can't do a search today on the internet without AI giving you opinion first, right? It used to be we would see the sponsored ads first and then the local businesses or something like that. Now it's the AI answer. And I don't care which browser you're using or which company you're talking to, it's there. It's everywhere you go.
Yeah, it's got its tendrils into everything, and it's going to be everywhere. Is the AI concept? How does it interact with you? How can you enter information into an AI platform and get stuff out of it? So it's everywhere, and that's why we wanted to have this timely discussion. So, um, Jackson, let me ask you this. So, why is shadow IT and SaaS sprawl? Why are those urgent issues for small and mid-sized businesses today?
Yeah, so there's a few risks that I would highlight there, some of which are obvious, some of which are less obvious. The first concern that I think comes to most people's minds is PII being leaked out of the LLM, and that's a real concern. It's not just a theoretical one. So we often think about PII and we think about it going into the LLM, but there's other risks that, as business owners, y'all should be thinking about. The first one that I would just highlight is your contracts. My guess is that you have contracts that differ from client to client. And so it can be really embarrassing if those other clients get out. Second piece is your own intellectual property, trade secrets, things like that that you have developed in-house. You've probably spent a lot of money and time on R&D, and to have that stuff just leaked out in the world can be a real nightmare. The final thing that I would just highlight too is the internal stuff, right? You have employees that are depending on you, right? And you have to keep their morale high. So sure, your internal employees, PII can come out there. That's, the first thing that we talked about. But also bear in mind that there are other things that you might not want to have out in the world. All of you have account executives that are receiving commissions. Maybe maybe they're making more money than you are, right? But imagine if, an accounting person learned that the account executive, with all their bonuses and commission structure, was making twice as much as they are. That could be a real nightmare for keeping your internal employees engaged and be a communications strategy that you don't want to have to employ. The other real thing that I would just share, and I'll post a link to this in a few minutes because we're going to talk about it some more, is that IBM studies these things every year and releases a cost of a data breach report. And the most recent 2025 edition, again, I will put a link to it in the chat shortly, um, is says that the use of shadow AI tools by your employees that aren't sanctions adds this is an average of $670,000 to the cost of a data breach, right? So that's on top of the millions of dollars that these data breaches cost. I think it's $3.3 million average in the United States. Now add another $670,000 for that. Right now, I'm just going to drop a link in chat for you guys talking about those shadow AI risks, the legal risks associated with it. I made a short video that may be interesting to you, so I'll drop that in chat, and that may be something that you want to forward around, watch in order to provide that kind of information to your clients.
fantastic information. It's really sobering. And I think that people, may not understand that when they type an email, an internal email with some strategy or some type of internal information, and they throw it into a publicly facing environment, chat GPT or whatever, just to have it proofread. That thing's proofread, it spits it back out, you paste it in your Outlook and you go. Well, all of that information theoretically is in part of the data on the back end of that structure. So it can be really, really impactful things, like you said, the contract, statements of work, financial information, all the way down to just like any internal email that may reveal something about your business that a competitor could take advantage of or embarrass a client, embarrass you, So that's really, really sobering. And that leads me to a question. So I'm going to ask a survey question here, and the survey should pop up for you, and you'll be able to answer it. And here's the audience poll. How confident are you that you know all the apps that your employees are using? Right. So how confident are you that you know that they do not go out to OpenAI and ChatGPT or any number of sites? Right. We're not picking on ChatGPT in any way. It's fantastic. So I'm going to answer mine. I'm not going to tell you what. There we go. Oh, I cannot vote. So let's see what this thing spits out. While this thing is spitting something out, let's do this. I'm gonna throw it over to Rob Foit, and I'll say, Rob, from your perspective, what kind of SaaS tools most often slip under the IT radar that people don't know about? The IT team may not know about them. The leaders in your organization may not know about them. But what kind of tools do that? What kind of websites do that?
I mean, it's a great question, Dan, because if you think about going out and doing a Google search or even an AI search for, hey, what free or low cost options do I have to do that I can share files with somebody? That's one way. File sharing and storage is probably one of the biggest ones before AI came along, that people would just drop files. I think somebody mentioned it earlier, so they could work on stuff at home because maybe they didn't have remote access into the organization's network, whatever the case may be there. Another area is project management or task management tools. That's another area that, because you're trying to track your stuff and maybe you don't like Project, or I think it's called Planner now, but maybe you don't like that, you want to find something else. So you'll get a free trial or a low cost option that, I'll just eat the, $5 a month that I'll take that and I'll just use this. Communication tools. You may have teams through the organization, but somebody likes Slack better or Zoom. And then obviously you've got the elephant in the room, AI tools that people use. And it's just, you've got to understand what you're as an organization using. And I know we'll touch on this later, but what vulnerabilities that's going to bring down the road when there is a compromise of that tool.
Yeah, we see that all the time in the managed services industry. And that's what Rob and I are in IronEdge, we're managed service provider. When a tool like, say, Dropbox is leveraged by a threat actor, that's largely outside of your control, right? And so there's a lack of just understanding of what's happening and how to be accountable and all this other stuff. But that's just one example of all these things throughout the world that theoretically your employees can interact with. And the flavor of the day is really AI platform. That's what we're talking about now. But this has been an IT problem ever since people could get to the internet, really. Okay. So let us jump to the next sort of subject here, which is Shadow IT and SaaS Sprawl. Dave, can you share a real world example of Shadow IT in action? And just kind of an example of that and how it created risks for the business.
Sure. I had a chuckle just a minute ago when you made the comment that this is not new to IT, right? Like the Shadow IT. And ever since the internet came out, I think is what you said. And the first thing that popped into my mind, and this is not what we're talking about today, but it is kind of the precursor, right? It's back in the day, Shadow IT was somebody bringing their home computer into the office and jacking into the network for updates because high speed was available at the office and it wasn't available at home, right? And so that's what we had to worry about. But today, it's a much different thing. Look, a couple of real case examples. 2023 ChatGPT. Samsung. We've all heard of a small company named Samsung. We had a semiconductor department. coding engineers, they use ChatGPT for some coding and some meeting notes. And the next thing you know, it's part of the public model, and competitors are now accessing all of their internal intellectual property. Keep in mind what you're talking about, and the things you've mentioned earlier, and what we'll further discuss is AI opens the door, for unsanctioned apps and shadow. But the biggest, shadow there is the supply chain, right? So what happens is your employees, your team, your staff, they're getting an application that is written by another company, right? We don't know if it's been vetted. We haven't approved it. Nobody knows what the back end of that is, right? And it's free. And now what happens when that software inventories the data on your computer? So it's not so much what the employee puts in to a learning model. But for instance, with Microsoft and Copilot, if that's not handled properly, Copilot is indexing everything that you have for your data sources, right? All of that stuff. And if you don't put guardrails and limits and things on what that data is, and if it's not corporately sandboxed, I mean, now what data is being shared? If it's on SharePoint, Copilot just indexes and crawls, right? So now those are the things that are opening up the door to a big problem. Those are the real examples.
Those are real world. We see them both every day. Yeah, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dan, one thing with what Dave was just saying, Copilot is very powerful, but permissioning in SharePoint and OneDrive and all that is extremely important, because if it's not permissioned correctly, then kind of what we were talking about earlier is accounting information or payroll information may be visible to just normal users if it's not, permissioned correctly.
Yes, Dan, that's also where you get into things like sensitivity labeling, right? Where we have to encrypt it or not, right? Is that data sensitive? And if it's encrypted, can it then be indexed by Copilot and so forth? So there's a lot of strategies that go with that. It's not just turning it on, like you're saying.
100%. I know, like in Jackson and what he has dealt with in his career day in and day out, it's very unlikely that any of that should be revealed to the rest of the organizations that he's working for. And so I have a question for Jackson. From a legal and compliance standpoint, why should leaders take it seriously from a purely your role standpoint? Talk to us about your experience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I love that Dave Groot just brought up, bringing the laptop into work. Not too long ago, I was working as a strategic communications consultant for a company that suffered a data breach. And they had done just that. They had essentially, used personal devices that were synced with their work network. And when they were attacked and ransomed, the threat actors downloaded all of that data, just like I had described, including things like trade secrets and accounting information. But here's a really scary one. There were intimate photos of the CEO's wife that had been posted, that had been, synced unknowingly to that work network. He thought it was fine because, it was behind his CEO's, he thought that they were walled off because they were in his private folders. But, when they got hit, all of that stuff got downloaded. And I say that because it segues not just to shadow IT, not just to AI shadow IT, but to shadow IT in general. Anytime, okay, so, we've created these when you're using Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever your internal tool is, you're keeping a log of all that stuff. And that's important for when it's time, when litigation starts, because you're going to have to turn over all that stuff and people are going to be deposed. If your team is using their personal cell phones here, thank you, Zoom, if they're using other tools, if they're just text messaging other coworkers regularly about these things, that's going to be discoverable. And so, if all those memes you send to your friends, those are all going to be discoverable. They may not be admissible. Okay. You're probably not, relevant to the breach at hand. But you better believe all those things, and not just your coworkers, everybody on your phone is going to be downloaded and potentially going to be available for the other attorneys to see. And that could get really awkward. So that's where Shadow IT fits in. I'm going to drop a link right now into the cost of a data breach report that I mentioned that comes out from IBM every year. And I just want to cite some of the statistics that they gave right on the front end, right? Global average breach cost is $4.88 million. Okay. $4.44 million, $4.44 million. It was $4.88 million. They've also got the statistics, $670,000 added when there's prevalent use of AI. Okay. And then, most related to, IronEdge's business is setting up those correct AI governance policies. Folks who have an AI related breach, 97% don't have access controls. 63% of organizations overall have no AI governance. So, take a look at, that data breach report. And just in the first couple of pages, you can see some really shocking statistics. One other thing, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I see in chat, Alvaro, you have asked about starting places to find those unknown unknowns. And we can talk about that in a few minutes. I've sort of taken up my time here, but we have some tools that can help you do that. And I'd be happy to share some of those with you. And those are going to be available straight from IronEdge for your use.
That I love everything you talked about because we're going to talk about it later. But there are solutions to the problems that we're talking about that businesses are facing now. And Jackson just started to talk about some of these things, which is identifying, do we have a problem? Do we have a way to put policies and procedures in place if we don't have any? How do we even write them? How do we monitor our environment ongoing to know if we continue to have problems? The IT industry overall and us as managed service providers, specifically related to AI, are putting this stuff together and baking it. It's coming out right now. And just, we'll talk about it later, but we use Galactic Advisors to augment our tool set with our customer base to solve some of those problems. So we'll get back to that. Really interestingly, as you were talking, Jackson, I thought a lot of clients get with the MSP and they don't necessarily understand why we won't support somebody's personal computer. Like, hey, we'll pay you to support it, and so we look at it, and this is the reason. Because if it's somebody's personal computer, we can't guarantee, or at least firmly believe, that it has antivirus on it, that it's well maintained, that it's patched, that the VPN is set up correctly, so on and so forth. There's a laundry list of things that make it very hard for us to audit and understand the status of. And because of that, we won't sort of bless it and say it's reasonably safe, right? So that's why your MSP really tends to not support personal computers for this exact reason, for the discussion we're talking about right now, because I don't want to be accountable for a CEO's personal computer that is not managed by us, that may not have AV, that may not have proper security in place, all of that stuff, for this exact reason. This is a perfect space. So it really stuck out to me. All right. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about more risk stuff. I love talking about risk because it helps you identify as a listener. I have these risks. I don't even know what they are. And we start to figure out what the risks are. Then I'll figure out how to potentially solve the problem. So Rob, question. From a technical perspective, why is SaaS Sprawl such a threat? Just if we're just going to talk technically and we're putting on our nerd hats.
So there's a number of things here. So, it expands the organization's attack surface. And what do I mean by attack surface is these applications that you don't know about or your IT department doesn't know about or aware of are being used. If there's a breach or some sort of incident with a vendor, and I'll pick on a file sharing company because we see a number of those. Your internal IT is looking at, oh, Box had a breach. We don't use that. We don't have to worry about it. So they don't know anything's happening when, one of your accounting people, marketing people, whoever may be using it and putting company information out there. And guess what? Maybe it was part of that incident and now a bad actor has that data. So that's one piece. It weakens your governance. So if you have to have compliance, CMMC is a hot button topic these days, but even, HIPAA and all this other information, somebody could throw up, medical information out there, it gets compromised. And now you've got a HIPAA violation. And then kind of tying it all together, you just have those security vulnerabilities that you don't know about because let's just say the person that's using Shadow IT only, secures it by using username and password. Well, if they're not using a strong password, it's easily cracked. They're not using MFA. They don't have SSO. Some of the basic things to keep their credentials secure and making sure it's only them logging in. So that's just a few of the things that we can, or not we, that you can experience by having that Shadow IT and the risk you're having.
I totally agree. And you're paying your IT team or your IT provider, you're paying them to sort of oversee and monitor and keep things secure. As simple as this, if things fall outside of that your IT team doesn't know about, they have no idea they even exist. They don't know if they're secure, they're not patched, they may not have MFA and all of those things. And this even takes, a common platform that we see that people may not be thinking about this type of thing is something that falls outside of your IT department's governance, like maybe your main core line of business app. Maybe the administrators for that line of business app are outside of your IT team, and they're in charge of, setting the settings for that app or enabling MFA or doing those type of things. There's times where maybe the IT department isn't involved in that, and they probably should be. They should know about those apps, know about, set a specific standard of configuration, ensure there's MFA, so on and so forth. Well, it's not the network, and it's not the computer, and it's not the firewall. It's still something that the IT team can provide guidance on how to secure. So sometimes it can be a little bit of a shadow. All right, Dave.
Boy, I'm gonna just pile right on that and keep on going for a second there because I mean, that was some pretty good stuff. Go ahead. What was your question? I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I mean, I love just listening. So I was just going to say from a human error standpoint, which we can tie that right back to what I was talking about. Like they just don't know. It may not be an error, but it's be lack of knowledge. Human error and misconfiguration. What role does that play? And I kind of give a little tidbit of it, but what have you seen in your career?
Well, I mean, so I've been in cybersecurity for some time now, and I've done a lot of things, presenting and writing books and on TV and had messages and discussed things. And I can say one of the constant messages from the very beginning is the weakest point on your network is the user, right? I don't care what we do. If you have users in the equation and they make a mistake or a misconfiguration or bypass a policy or, inadvertently not even knowing it, maybe they're using their mobile phone for doing a little bit of work and they install a personal app, rightfully so, because it's their mobile phone and it has some AI function in it and it's not, not clean, and it starts looking at the stuff that you have and now it's sharing it. So yeah, what is the human element? They're basically the match, right? And then misconfiguration is fuel, and then like IT not knowing about it is a slow burn, and then you got a big breach.
Algae's fantastic because it's absolutely true, and we see it on the back end every day.
Right.
Really, really good analogy. so this, while Jackson was speaking, Rob was speaking, Dave was speaking, I was thinking about this. Y'all may not know, and sometimes I forget that if you're using your mobile phone, you have an Apple phone, it's going to sync all of your stuff to iCloud, largely, right? And if some of your stuff, your corporate information is synced to your mobile phone and that's synced in iCloud, then iCloud is attacked and leveraged. You could very well have not only your personal stuff in there, but your corporate stuff in there. So Jackson, let me ask you this. What legal or regulatory consequences could SMBs face if data is leaked through an unauthorized app or an unauthorized system, like in that case, iCloud would be?
Yeah, it's kind of a scary question and it's a new frontier. When I'm looking at legislation and regulations, right? because sometimes those are two different things, right? Sometimes the legislature, says, well, we want to protect this, and so we're enabling this agency to write, regulations on it. I generally look at California because they are typically the state that other states follow. And so there is, this is a new area, and so those regs are being hammered out. But there's already legislation pending in the state of California to update CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. Many of you have probably seen that because it's something that we all have to obey, even if we're not in California, because we probably have customers in California. But some of the pending legislation includes including mandatory notices about automated decision-making technologies that are made with using AI. They're updating the CCPA to reflect those additional protections. And then you're also going to see some industry-specific regulations. Those involve healthcare workers who use AI tools. And even chatbots are going to be affected, where, what happens if you've got a 12-year-old, right, that's now talking to a chatbot. We need to let individuals know that that's happening. So, that's some of the up and coming legislation that we're seeing just right here in California. And we'll see what other states come up with as well.
And what I tell people is over the last, say, 4 or 5 years in IT, the cyber insurance renewal policy and questionnaire that people have had to fill out it's gotten more and more and more complex because insurance companies don't get rich by claims, right? What I believe will happen, and Jackson, maybe you would agree with this, that cyber insurance questionnaire is going to start to incorporate more and more AI questions. I
Yeah,
don't know if you think that'll happen.
that's exactly right. And maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I've absolutely seen lately where cyber insurers are carving out exceptions for AI. They want you to sign an addendum saying that your policy is not going to cover that. Well, that's an awfully big loophole that they're asking for. So, I would really want your own attorney to take a hard look at that. Or maybe even go to your insurance broker and say, we got to do something different here because, this is a lot of liability that they're placing squarely on my shoulders now, where they're going to deny the claim if it's an AI enabled attack or it's related to an AI related data breach.
Yeah, you said it really, really well. It's a huge loophole, right? Because everything theoretically, everything, my washer and dryer, I've said that before, has AI in it. So the cyber insurer can potentially look at all these different things and go, well, this AI is outside of your control, so not pay. So that's why. So now, the conversation at this point, we can talk about this stuff all day. We're going to pivot just a little bit to strategies to kind of monitor and control this stuff, right? Because we know it's an issue. We know AI is an up and coming part of it. What are we going to put in place to understand it? How can we understand it's there? How can we control it? So that's what I want to get into now a little bit. So I can plant these seeds in the listeners' heads that there are ways to do this. There's ways to understand what's there. There's ways to set policy. There's ways to kind of control it. So I'm going to throw this out probably to the more recently technical people, to Rob and Dave. How can SMBs gain visibility into all the apps their employees are using without necessarily slowing down productivity or creating a big hassle? How can you know what your people are doing if you don't know?
So there's different tools out there that can detect what's being used in different ways. Like there's some that you can have an agent downloaded and see what's going on people's machines. There's also other trackers that just track what websites they go to and things like that to see how they're using it. But I'll let Dave kind of chime in on some of the other stuff.
Certainly, during like Microsoft, a lot of organizations are using the Microsoft 365 platform. So it's something we can't ignore, and we need to talk about that. And there's a lot of things there that are able to help, mitigate what apps are being accessed by the users. You can reduce the attack surface using their tools. Now, there's also a lot of inherent risk in some of that, just as we already spoke about, right? Like Copilot, wonderful tool, but if it's misconfigured, mishandled, it's a big liability. Microsoft has a lot of tools, things like Microsoft Recall, which is recording screens, right? It's recording the activity of your users. So, hey, that can be a wonderful thing, maybe, but it can also be a really bad thing if that information happens to be CUI on the screen and it gets out into an AI model. And the next thing you know, we got a problem with the DoD, and that's not a knock on the door you're looking for. You know, we've had traditionally, it's been a big problem getting like, look, Galactic Advisors, you folks who, you know, our world is about liability, cyber liability. It's about compliance. It's about regulations, right? We just talked about the HIPAA and the different things, the privacy of data, right? The protection of that critical data asset. That's what that's all about. All of those things. Now, what I have seen, and I know what a lot of you have seen, and this is the unfortunate, is in many cases, and in most all cases for small businesses, if they haven't sat down and maybe gone through an incident response plan session or something, they haven't even identified what those critical data assets all are, right? So first off, a lot of them don't know what they're protecting. Then they don't know who has access to that, what vendors, what software, what, and then, you know, how does that affect my insurance policy? Am I liable for that kind of stuff? So all of those things have been problems. Now you get into AI. So we're talking about this same critical data. We're talking about the same privacy regulations, but we have something that is going to engage itself automatically based on how you configure it, right? And based on guardrails and security. And if you're not anonymizing EPHI and it gets into an AI model, that can be a problem again if it's not sandbox. So now it amplifies the ability for what we've already seen many small business. And when I say small business, I'm saying, you know, 1,000 people and less, or even higher in some cases. I'm not talking just mom and pop shops, although those folks are affected just as badly. You know, they already have a lean IT department. They're already stretched thin. They're already struggling to figure out what a policy needs to be and getting it in place and having everybody follow, having that maturity and that, you know, in the organization, this is the habits that we have, right? It's not about having a policy. It's about making it a habit. It's about a culture. It's about driving that and having people understand the danger behind their actions. So I don't mean to keep running on. Sorry.
Hey, can I jump in and I'll share something as well? Sorry, Dan.
No, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to share something with you all, and I think it directly addresses Alvaro's question that was in the chat a second ago, and that's how do we identify these these issues as they come up. We have created a tool, and you can get this through IronEdge, that will do just that. It does, you know, I'm not a technical wizard like the other panelists on here, but essentially it will do almost like a pen test where it's going to scan your environment for using AI tools. It'll give you the executive summary up front, and then it will jump right into the devices and the AI applications that it discovers are being used on your system. And so, you know, you can get with IronEdge or get with, and they can put you in touch with Galactic, and that will help you just walk through the issues and controls, as well as ways that, you know, that we can all help you mitigate those concerns. And so, you know, we'd love to share that with you. And yeah, that is available and a great way to address those unknown unknowns. Right, Alvaro? All right, that's what I got there.
I love it. I absolutely love it, because that segues really in well into what I really want to drive home, which is we need to understand that there's a problem, first of all. And I think what we've sussed out during this call is there's certainly a problem for every business everywhere. This is a problem. But then knowing that there are solutions in place to understand what the risk is and what you have, how to consistently report on that, how do we mitigate the risk, all of that stuff is stuff that that people like IronEdge, who then leverage Galactic, can provide to you. We can help you understand what's there, like what is the risk. We did an internal check, Dave and Jackson, We basically use the DNS filter tool, and we audited a certain amount of computers that we support. And what we found out was 40% of those machines were actively using some type of AI-based website, right? And so that doesn't surprise me. Actually, I'm surprised it wasn't a little bit higher. But 40% of I would propose to people listening, I'd say it's a pretty safe number to say 40% of your team is already using this stuff. They could be putting any number of things in it. So what do we do? So we need to know what the problem is. We need to know what the sprawl is. And then we come in and we have to establish policies. So really quickly, and then we'll jump to the rest of the questions and we'll kind of wrap this thing. As I've consulted for the last 20 years, one of the first questions any client prospect says is, I don't know where to start with my policy. I have no idea how to start. So we leverage tools and systems that can help you create that policy. And Jackson and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but Galactic will help do that.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that I would just add too is that, these tools are becoming so insidious. How many of you have opened Adobe Acrobat Reader, right? And now it's almost like they're requiring you to use their tool. Or as part of just the terms of use buried in there says we are allowed to use data you enter into our system to perfect our own models. But every tool is using this. It's not just the Microsoft Copilots and the Chat GPTs of the world. It includes the software that you have installed on your devices, like Acrobat Reader, like some of the Zoom or Teams that actually are recording and transcribing your meetings. Have a connection to that kind of stuff. The other one that comes to mind is, I had it a second ago. I think even HubSpot, right? If you're using HubSpot as your customer, your CRM, there are now AI features that are built into this, whether you know it, whether you like it, whether you agree to it or not.
I would say everybody's line of business apps that they use every day, that they go into the website and they do stuff. They all want to say they're IT forward. They want to say IT provides a competitive advantage. Well, what does that mean for my data within that platform? I have no idea as your IT provider. I don't know what they're going to do. To piggyback on that, I've got one more question for each member of the group here, and then we're gonna have a final survey here. But Jackson, perfectly dovetailing into that, what policies or governance practices should organizations adopt? Like, what should you even have in place to reduce liability?
Yeah, so I think indemnification is always huge, right? So you want to make sure that if you are using these platforms, that you want to negotiate an indemnity clause that says that that they are responsible for it or not. Getting into the technical things about governance policies to make that happen. I think Dave Groot would be a better reference than me. I guess the other piece too is I talked to some class action data breach attorneys on Friday that are friends of mine. And, they're essentially looking for low-hanging fruit. And they know that when a breach happens, somebody's liable, right? It's almost like we in the legal community there's a term that means the thing speaks for itself, right? And that's what happens when there's a data breach. Obviously, somebody screwed up along the lines. And so then it's pretty easy just to apportion liability out that way. And so that's something that you need to keep in mind is, anybody can sue anyone for any reason in this country. And so what you want to do is be able to say, we met these certain industry standard frameworks. The thing that happened to us was not something that can be planned for. We've got the evidence, we've got the logs, we've got the acceptable use policies, for our employees. All of that's ready to go because we were trying to protect our data as best we possibly can.
Love it. Yeah, and those are real questions that have to be answered. Do like errors and omissions policies help?
Yeah, certainly.
Our contractual language and different contractual language I see from our peers and so forth. That language is in there, so we always look at it. We try to understand as we're working with somebody. Well, what's in that language? What does this mean? So I would suggest everything. Okay, I know we're getting toward the end of the hour. I want to ask Dave a question, ask Rob a question, then we'll have a final survey. So Dave, going forward, with AI accelerating SaaS adoption. How will this change shadow IT in the landscape? What do you see in the future here? It's going to get easier to manage. It's going to get terrible. What's going to happen to this?
Well, terrible. I mean, I don't want I don't want to look at it like anything terrible is going to happen. Certainly, look, there certainly is a lot of risk. And it is the new shadow IT. AI is in essence what shadow IT is today. And so it's a new surface. It's a new thing that we have to get our arms and our heads wrapped around. I can remember, I don't want to make light of it, but back in the early 90s, we had this thing called the internet come out, and there was a little thing with it called email. And I used to struggle to get people to use it in business because it was going to destroy the world, right? It was bad. It was evil. It was a temporary thing. It was a phase. I got a fax machine, don't need it. Now, we all thought that was going to be a bad thing. Not we all, but a lot of folks did. And certainly the potential is all there. We know email can be a dangerous thing, right? Like if you use it in the wrong way, if somebody gets a hold of it and sends out on your behalf, all those things can be used against you. But as an industry, as in business in general, we've come to find ways to work around it. So I think, the biggest thing I want folks to understand is this is going to require a couple of things. A culture shift, but more importantly, and this is different than the old days, transparency and openness to everybody in the organization with why and what is allowed. And then make certain all the governance things Jackson talked about and you talked about are important. None of those are unimportant, but make certain you have a well-defined and clearly understood approval process for the use of AI tools in the organization. Make it easy for somebody to ask. And it doesn't have to be, you made a comment earlier, Dan, and you're right, the IT department needs to know about that if it's another department that's in charge of that line of business at. But the security team is who should be sitting down and having that meeting when that department decides that they want to vet that app. That's where it starts. That security team may be partially IT, maybe all IT, but somebody needs to know in the organization every time there's a new thing being added, like you said.
I love that. Let me ask Rob a question straight from that. Rob, I'm a business owner. I'm talking to you. I say, Rob, I want to completely eliminate shadow IT. This sounds like a giant problem. Can you do that? Is that possible? What do you think?
I mean, the likelihood to eliminate it completely, probably not going to happen, but you can take steps to, mitigate against it. And kind of like what Dave was saying is on top of the AI stuff, having a group or a committee, a way to vet applications and make sure that you're, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, asking the vendor the right questions. The biggest thing, anytime I hear AI, I go, where does that information live? Like, does it live in an AWS platform? Does it live in an Azure platform? Does it live in somebody else's platform? Because I'm always wanting to know where that data goes and who has control over it. And so even with a regular vendor outside of that, those are the same questions. And you want to ask those types of questions of where does this data reside? Who has access to it? What happens during a data breach? How am I notified? How soon do you have to notify me? I could go on. And Dan, I know you've heard me talk about this. It's just that transparency and, don't be offended by the questions a vendor, you need to ask a vendor because it's important. It's your data, it's your livelihood, it's your employees' livelihoods that you're putting at risk every time, you sign a contract with somebody.
What I'm hearing you say is, the way I interpret what you said is it's going to be really hard to wrangle all the shadow IT, even within a limited budget. It's super difficult, but you need to understand what the concept is. You need to have a method to understand what's out there. You need to have policies, procedures in place to sort of guide behavior. And one more thing I'll add on that I'm asking you guys, one last question. You need to have an appropriate alternative to the things you're taking away. So if you're taking away individual uses of Dropbox, cool, how can I share stuff with my clients that I need to collaborate on? You need to have something that you can say, I know you want to use Dropbox. We can't use that here. Here you go. It's the internal FTP server, whatever it is, right? I know you want to use ChatGPT. I know you may even have a subscription to it, which is great, but I can't control any of that. Here's a platform you can use. We have something called IronAI, just that people can use in place of that, that the data is wrangled and you know what's there and it can be centrally managed and that data doesn't turn into learning data and this other stuff. So be able to, you know, as a business leader, be able to have an alternative where people can get whatever they need done. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask this question to the group, and then we'll have one final survey and then we'll wrap it up to it. So for everyone, if you could give SMB leaders one piece of advice for preparing for all of this today or dealing with all of this today, if you're in your elevator ride, what would that piece of advice be? And I'll start with Dave.
I would say AI is a wonderful tool and it can help increase productivity. It can help, you know, standardize and give you good results, analyze data and provide you with information. Obviously, it brings a lot of risk. If I was going to send them home with one thing, it would be understand what it is that you want to do with the data in the tools, and then always have a human intervention in the middle of anything being sent out as a result of that tool. Meaning AI tools can be inaccurate. AI tools can lie. AI tools can make stuff up all day long. And if you don't have human eyes on that data before it hits the public, hits your client base, hits your whatever that is, you got a, you know, privacy issue potentially, you got a reputation issue, you got lost business. I mean, all of those things come into play from just not addressing the issue. So don't ignore it.
Dave, I'm astounded because I was going to say something very, very similar. And that's the amount of AI slop that I see on a day-to-day basis just, you know, makes me want to, it makes me just want to pull the covers over my head. You know, so many times I, as a lawyer, am getting documents that, you know, people have said, hey, ChatGPT, generate a contract. And the outcome is crap. And they're not even taking the time to read it over and realize it. We've all seen the news stories about lawyers who are filing briefs with hallucinated cases. But, you know, all the time I'm seeing AI say stuff that is just out there. And you know what? Even apart from the legal liability side of it, it's your reputation, right? It's your reputation. You need to be credible. That's what you've, you know, that's what you've spent the last 10, 15, 20 years building, is that reputation to your clients. And when they start seeing stuff that is so obviously AI slop, they're going to write you off and they're going to say this person doesn't really care about what they're sending out.
Well, it could turn into liability, like a misstatement, right? Like a,
oh yeah,
all
100% false advertising, right?
Big time.
Yeah. Question your AI responses. That's what I'm. Rob, we're in the elevator. You know, give me one piece of advice.
I mean, I've got to kind of echo what Dave and Jackson said, because that's the biggest thing. You know, attention to detail, check your work, check your AI's work, because it is known to be false and not correct. Don't trust it.
Really strong. I have a story for another day where an AI spit out some information that I just really questioned, and I was able to kind of keep asking it questions till it realized it was wrong, which is really strange to me. Okay. I want to thank Jackson and Dave and Rob for joining us, joining companies with Galactic Advisors and IronEdge to put these on. These are fantastic, and we love to do them. And the panelists we have here are super knowledgeable, and the content's fantastic. I'm going to leave everybody with, if you want more information or you want some direction on all of the things we've talked about, which is how to identify what shadow IT is in your environment, including AI, how to create policies and procedures to help your team dictate that, how to sort of monitor and control all of those systems, and then even how to have AI-based alternatives for your employees that they could use AI, but in a structured, controlled way. A combination of Galactic and IronEdge can help you find those answers, and we can give you feedback, and we can provide things to put you in a spot where we're answering and addressing these questions. So if anybody wants any further information on that, we'd be glad to talk to you. We would love to talk to you. So we're going to post up a poll now that basically says, if you want some more information on anything we talk about, there's the poll thing saying, if you want any more information, yeah, great. We'll get in touch with you. We can talk about any number of things, even things that we really didn't dig into and pull the thread on too much. Between Galactic and Advisors and IronEdge, it's very likely we would at least be able to provide some direction. We're glad to do that. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. I love these. I want to thank the panelists again. And everybody have a fan.
That was a great time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
and
Dan.
we'll see you all next time.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Talk soon.
Thank you.